I'm here to talk to you about a different kind of development, not the kind that involves economics, but the kind that involves the life stream from an infant through his first 2 or 3 years of life. I've worked with children who are on the autism spectrum for a very long time, but I hadn't known when I first started to work with these children how important it was to understand neuroscience. In fact, when I was in medical school, I skipped neuroscience. I did just a lot of psychiatry instead, because it didn't seem to be particularly relevant to the kind of work we did in psychiatry. But lo and behold, now all I can do is think about ways to find out from my neuroscience colleagues just what is happening in the brain of an autistic child. What is happening in the brain of this child that doesn't allow this child to be on the typical developmental trajectory? Not the economic one, but the one in which a child learns how to have emotions, had to think, had to feel, and had to be able to put those feelings into thoughts, and then put them into thoughts so that their parents can understand them and be able to understand what their parents are asking of them. It sounds pretty simple if you're raising a child who is typically developing. But now we are seeing an explosion, as you know, of autism spectrum disorder. Only a year ago, there were 1 in 80 births of autism, and now there are 1 in 55 at the current time, with a ratio of about 4 boys to 1 girl. That's pretty standard. We have to help these children, but how? They have a neurological disorder. We don't know what it is, but there's something in their brain that doesn't allow them to develop. I'd like to try to help explain it. If I explain it to you, maybe I'll understand it a little better. We know that the major issue we see with an autistic child is that they seem socially incompetent or socially out of tune or socially lacking in empathy. There are all kinds of words people use, or they have no theory of mind, which means they can't read your mind, they can't read mom's mind, and they feel like they can't be read. I'll start with a very simple example of something that's not really social. Imagine a little baby, he's in his crib or his playpen, and he picks up a rattle. He shakes the rattle, it looks pretty, and his mom's sitting over there, and she's so excited because now her baby's done a new trick. Well, while he's picking up that rattle, his brain is doing a number of things. It's registering a signal to his muscle, picking up. It's registering the visual, the auditory, and the pleasure and reward system in showing off for his mother. We have an old saw. When you have neurons, you know what neurons are, neurons that fire together, wire together, which means that connections are made, kind of like going from New York City to Long Island, as the gentleman said. And once those connections are made, they're there for life. Now a baby can pick up a rattle, a toy, an iPad, anything he likes, but he won't have to think about it. And it has no repercussions in the social world unless his mother says, enough of the iPad. But as far as picking things up, he can do that whether he's a typical child, and this is important, or a child on the autism spectrum. Because though children have no more difficulty picking up a rattle or doing anything motoric, if you know any autistic children, you know that they're perfectly capable and facile with things, with cars, with toys, with iPads, in fact, and all kinds of computer equipment that I don't know how to understand how to operate at all. But let me give you an example where an autistic child has a lot of trouble, which leads us to our central thought for today, that if a child can't develop some kind of symbolic functioning about people as opposed to understanding how objects work, he loses the capacity to relate to his family, starting with relating to his mother. So again, picture the same little baby lying in his crib, hungry. He wakes up hungry, starts crying. His mother comes to the door. She's either got a breast or a bottle to feed him. She goes to the crib quickly, she picks him up, he starts feeding. As soon as the nipple is in his mouth, he's happy as a clam, he's satisfied. Mother's satisfied too because she feels confident. I know how to feed this baby. And now the baby is firing and wiring all those same components. He acted on the world, there's cause and effect, he made mother come. He has feelings about the being cuddled and held. So actually more systems are firing than picking up a rattle. Now, interestingly, the baby has a new kind of experience, which is that, oh, my mother's at the door when I'm hungry, and oh, look, I see my mother, I know I'm going to be fed. The cause and effect part has already taken over, and he stops crying when she arrives at the door. This is really the most important thing we can learn about development, because what's happening is that there's now a space, like pause 10 seconds, where the baby recognizes the mother, not really knowing, because his brain hasn't myelinated, but he recognizes from a pattern that he's now going to be fed, and he doesn't need to cry, because mom will come and feed him, and she can represent, by standing at the door, this whole picture of the wiring and firing of being fed and satisfied. Autistic children, we think, don't have that capacity, or they may have some of that capacity, but not enough to carry them through the first couple of years of life. So picture a baby who cannot understand that mother at the door represents help is on the way. What does he do? The next day when she comes, instead of help is on the way, which she would expect from him, it's all new. It's a surprise. How many of you like surprise parties? Raise your hands. And how many of you hate surprise parties? Well, for an autistic child, every minute of every day is like a surprise party. It's all new all the time. Now imagine if you were the mother of such a child, how frustrating that would be, because the expectations that your baby would learn would have a learning curve for being fed, a learning curve for following your expectations, your demands, trying new foods, going to sleep on time, being toilet trained. There's something that happens in the brain of the autistic child that doesn't allow him to see these patterns and to use them going forward throughout his day, his week, and his life. I would like to tell you how hard it is for a mother and a baby to survive without being frustrated, angry, and disappointed in each other for days, weeks, in a very powerful way until we provide the help is on the way. But in the meantime, these children develop symptoms that are very puzzling, hard to understand, make the parents frazzled and crazy. The kids feel so overwhelmed by the demands on them and their inability to meet them because they really don't understand what's expected. And their parents think, well, maybe they're just being naughty or something else is wrong. They don't get that, in the first months or year that there's a neurobiological problem. The children shy away from their parents. They start twirling. They pick up cars, running them back and forth. Things that are like rattles, things that have no expectations and that they can control. And they comfort themselves by doing things with objects instead of going to mother for comfort and soothing. Well, I'd like to give you a case, a description of a little boy I worked with, one of many, but one whose play was so remarkable and whose relationship with his mother was such a paradigm of what can go wrong in a relationship between mother and child that I think it's illustrative of what we do, and also because working with this little boy was lots of fun. So he came to see me when he was about 30 months old. He was twirling, he took cars, running them back and forth, and he would be singing, "The wheels on the bus go crash, crash, crash." Well, that's not the way the song goes. He identified with the wheels on the bus go round and round while he was twirling. So he's kind of clever. And the wheels on the bus go crash, crash, crash was his distortion based on how angry he was inside about how disappointed his mother was in him because he was autistic. And how angry he was at her because she didn't understand him. And there was this vicious cycle of, I don't understand you, you're making meaningless behavior. Well, for him, everything she was asking of him was pretty meaningless too. So they had a terrible disconnect in their relationship. So mom and dad, he had a dad too, but I talk about the mother because mostly the mothers are the primary caregivers. And she is overwhelmed and desperate for help. But both of them are pretty angry at each other. He had never been hugged. He'd never let her touch him, really. He was really physically averse in addition to the twirling and whirling. So I spoke to them in the beginning and got to know their family a little bit and saw Max for a few sessions, but then we had a summer vacation. We come back together in September, and lo and behold, there was 9/11. We had a session on Monday after 9/11, and Mom comes in enraged because Max had spent the whole weekend watching a video on television over and over and over, which is his way of comforting himself. And of course, if you remember 9/11, those of you who are as old as I am, they would show the clips of 9/11 constantly, which made little kids think the towers kept getting crashed into, that it wasn't a one-time event, it kept happening and happening. And even if they didn't see it on television, it was on the newsstands, strollers going by. So Max certainly knew about 9/11. And he also felt the anxiety of his family, in addition to this terrible anxiety about disappointing his parents, which made him just want to run his cars back and forth, and being angry at them that they didn't like that he was autistic, which he got. So Mom comes in telling me about this horrible weekend, and while she's telling me, Max gets down on the floor, as he did every session, and he's running his car back and forth on the floor. Wheels on the bus go crash, 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 and drowning us out. So, okay, I get the message. We're not going to have any conversation. I get down on the floor. I'm going to demonstrate to you how we try as therapists to get into the minds and hearts of our little patients so that they can feel like we understand them, because their mothers feel like they can't. And if we can understand them, then we model for the parents how to understand your little boy. So I get down on the floor, and I pick up a car, and I start joining him. The wheels on the bus go crash, crash, crash. Well, he looks at me like, what an idiot. Who are you? Why are you doing this? I thought, well, okay. I got through to him. He then went over to a box I had with blocks in it, and he's never done that before. So I took out the blocks, and I built twin towers with these, big childcraft blocks, and I handed him a book. I said, go ahead, knock the towers down. No, crashing was just something you sing-song, not something you do. So I did it. I crashed the towers down. I said, oh no, it was so scary. And he looked at me again like, whoa. And he took the blocks, and after I built another tower, he then gave himself permission to knock the towers down. And this started a whole playful moment, which was really play, not just using toys as a kind of excuse for play. And we built and knocked down towers. He then took a bus and crashed the bus into the towers. And all the while, I'm singing the song with him and talking about how scary 9/11 was and how hard it was for him to feel like he was going to get any comfort. And while I'm talking and sort of babbling like I am now, trying to make some sense for him and his mother of what he was thinking and what his weekend was like, he went over to my bookshelf and he took a book, and I'm thinking, what is he doing? He'd never taken a book down before, and guess what book? It was Spot Hiding from His Mother. I said, well, okay. I took that hint too, and I said, I see, Max, you're afraid that crashing these blocks is going to make your mother angry at you, and you're trying to hide your feelings from her. You don't think it's okay for you to crash these blocks. And he looked at me and he said, yes, which of course was brand new. And then I said again, oh, Max, I know that you're afraid your parents aren't going to hug you and take care of you and comfort you when all these terrible things are happening in the world. And his mother agreed, and he went over to her and let her give him a hug. So that was one of those miracle moments in therapy that makes you want to be a therapist, because it helped the mother understand right there on the spot that Max was reachable, that we could read him and his seemingly meaningless behavior, and all of which was actually sort of symbolic in behind the scenes, but not had been usable, not words. And in order to use words, you have to have that pause 10 minutes where something can be represented by something else. That's what words are. They are a substitute for action. without the substitution, you can't use words for conversation. You can't talk to somebody about how they feel, and vice versa. So in this moment with this boy and going forward, I could model for his mother that there was some way he could become symbolic in his language, in his play, that he and she could be understood together, and we could reconnect them and repair their relationship. And going forward, he would be able to get back on track, which he did, and go off to a mainstream school, which he did, and, you know, more or less enter that world of typical trajectory, just like everybody else with their problems, but successful enough for his parents to feel like they could understand him and take care of him, and they would have a social fabric that allowed him to be social and educated with like everybody else. So with that, I hope to inspire some of you to go on and become child psychiatrists or psychoanalysts, because we need these kinds of treatments to add to the teamwork with the OT, the speech therapist, the physical therapist. The children need all of that, but they also need someone to help the mother-child relationship, to reconnect them, to help them symbolize together what is happening, especially the anger and aggression and frustration, so that they can normalize their relationship and become typically developing families. So thank you very much.